Bugatti from France. Alfa Romeo from Italy. And Bentley from Britain. When motor racing bred aristocrats, these were the noblest names of all, and they ruled in the Roaring Twenties. Between the wars, Brooklands in Surrey was the home of British motor racing. It was the Ascot of the sport, a social as well as a racing event.
Backing onto this fence but round the corner, please. Thank you. Would you like to follow this car, please?
Today, in the old paddock, owners of veteran cars still meet to talk about their thoroughbreds.
He was a great believer in dry clutches.
Yes, dry.
Oh, Hugh's got that dry. No, it's wet. You must have them wet.
Yeah.
You must have them wet, Peter.
Brooklands was built in 1907 because racing on public roads was banned in Britain. It was the first specially built racing circuit in the world, a place for British car makers to test their cars and for British drivers to compete. The concrete circuit was fast. Competing on it took more courage than skill. Parts of it was straight and level, but the great attraction was the perilous banking.
The first sight I had of Brooklands, I remember, was this terrific sweep of banking. And the atmosphere of the place somehow got me. There was something very special about it. There was the sound, the spectacle. You could, in those days, you saw the driver at work. You didn't have to have a crash hat if you didn't want to. Not all of them did. And there he was at the top of the banking, fighting this thing, you know, because Brooklands was not actually a boys' track to drive on for real. If you were really going to drive fast at Brooklands, you had to know all about it.
It was always a difficult track and very bumpy. And of course, to drive on the banking with a fast car, you had to use the very top part of the banking, and there wasn't much room for several cars there, so it was a bit dangerous, but very exciting.
It's clinging on with your eyeballs, isn't it? You know, you've got a certain amount of G-force. You know, it just keeps you up there if you're going fast enough. If you're not going fast enough, you're stupid to be up there because you're getting everybody else's way. And it was a cause of a lot of hard feeling from time to time when slower cars were riding too high up on the banking, and the people who were really going fast, who needed all the bloody room they could get, they couldn't get it because some Bert was stuck up much higher than he should be.
Well, I first came to Brooklands in 1933 when Whitney Straight and I were undergraduates at Cambridge, and we flew down from Cambridge we weren't allowed motor cars at Cambridge in our first year, so we were allowed to have aeroplanes instead.
Racing at Brooklands was expensive. A Bugatti or Bentley cost over £1,000, 3 times the price of a family house. Spectators paid £1 to get into the paddock when the average wage was £6 a week.
It was unique. It was a magic in it, quite peculiar and particular to Brooklands. And of course, the famous phrase was the right crowd and no crowding.
A lot of the top motoring people also were flyers, flew aircraft here as well as drove cars, and you needed a lot of money for that. So I think there was more of a high society here. Because, of course, in those days, it was just like a horse race course. The betting and the starting and finishing were very much on horse race standards.
Brooklands was then the only place in Britain where cars were raced. It was difficult for ordinary people to reach. The motor racing fans of the day talked in the confident tones of the elite.
Life was an adventure, and we were young and excited. It was all fun. I came down here first because all my young men were the Bentley boys, who were the dashing, exciting young men of the time, and they all raced here, you see. You know, there was always people fussing with the things and trying to get the aeroplanes going, and of course the cars. They weren't very good in those days, you see. We were always breaking down if we went to a long journey or anything like that.
At a party at my house, a man suggested that women could not drive as well as men. I replied that, on the contrary, I could find 9 amateurs who could drive extremely well. The original idea has developed into a race, and I believe and hope there is a good prize. Lady de Clifford and I are very glad to have won in our little MG. It's been great fun. I think we've proved that women can drive as well as men.
But Brooklands had its darker side. The last event of the 1932 season was the British Racing Drivers' Club 500-mile race. Among the fastest cars was a favourite of the Bentley boys. They called her Old Number One. It was driven by 2 brothers, Jack and Clive Dunphy. After a pit stop, Clive took over the wheel. He was soon lapping at over 120 miles an hour on the members' banking, moving high up on the edge to overtake slower cars. And then... Dunphy was killed outright. Brooklands was unique, but that uniqueness kept Britain out of the mainstream of motor racing and stunted the development of racing cars. The gates were closed for the war in 1939 and never reopened.